Today, we're joined by a creative director who's built brand systems inside some of the most iconic companies in the world, from Apple and Meta to Whedon and Kennedy and AKQA. That was a bit of a tongue twister for me. And now brings that same level of rigor and taste to B2B software companies through his studio, Workisplay. He believes brand isn't decoration. It's the compounding asset that makes positioning inevitable. So I'm really excited for this conversation. Welcome, Dinesh, to Fully Managed.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for the kind intro.
Of course. So,
and AKQ, and just so you know, AKQA is a very hard tongue twister. So, you did great.
I had to Google how do you pronounce that. I knew that I was gonna.
We used to call it Aqua back in the day. We used to be like, oh, we just work for Aqua.
That's what I thought when I first saw it. It's like, oh, it's pronounced Aqua. Thank God. I Googled it before. So, you've said most growth stage software companies treat brand like decoration, something to worry about after positioning is done. So when a founder comes to you asking for a website redesign, what are the early signs that the real issue isn't the website, it's their positioning or brand clarity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the very first sign is they've sort of hit their growth. They haven't been able to grow. Their customers are not able to, they're not able to grow faster with their customers, but also just looking at their website. Actually, one of the first things that we do when we jump into conversations with founders is let's do a critique of your website. Let's pull up your website on a call and let's start scrolling and let's read every bit of headline. And if they don't know how to explain it or understand it, or if we don't understand, or if anybody else on the group doesn't quite understand what exactly this thing does or how it impacts their customers, we have a positioning problem here. We have a strategic positioning problem because your customers are coming to your website, and usually founders are, especially early stage founders, they are doing a million things. They're growing their company, they're growing their product. They have 10 people, now 20 people, now 30 people on the team. We need to, raise and capital and more. There's a lot going on in the founder's head. So the founder usually understands their product and can sell their product themselves, but they need that marketing team to sort of take their vision and say it. And the best way to do that is through your website, through kind of written form, what is it your customers need? What is it that your product does? And your customers, and you're pointing your product to your specific ICPs. And if we can't read it and your customers don't understand that, that's when there's a problem here. That's when the real work, foundational work needs to happen. And I think that is really kind of the indicator there.
And what do you think are, the signs that positioning is strong internally, but the brand system isn't doing its job externally? Do you think it's the same? They're not growing?
Yeah, it's different. I think it can be different. Usually the brand work has been done by someone or someone at a way earlier stage of the at a very young early stage of the company, and usually those budgets are 10 to 15,000, and they're using it on they're getting people from Fiverr or just friends or family, or even sometimes these days vibe coding their own sort of brand and design and website. And so when they are in the process of raising around a Series A moment, they need to look legit. They need to look trustworthy. They need to look and feel and speak like they know what they're doing. It's time to grow up. We're not in elementary school anymore. We're going to university, right? And so that's where we kind of come in, and we say, hey, look, these brand colors and whatever, that was great when you didn't have a website and you built a brand around a logo, a business card, and there wasn't much thinking done in that process. We come in and we say, look, let's look at your copy. Let's look at your website. Let's look about how you're talking about the company, what your product does. How do we really take that founder jargon and really simplify it to your ICPs and really hone in on exactly what it is that you do. And after we've agreed on that and we've aligned on that, let's now build a brand. Let's build a brand for you. So when we're making a color decision, like, oh, we're going from red to blue, there's a reason why we're going from red to blue, because it aligns with your foundational elements. Your copy makes sense with what we're doing, with the color or the design or the graphic that we're making, the stroke weight. Everything is in service of some of the foundational work that goes into it. So every pixel is determined by exactly what we're doing, how we're doing. It is in service of each other. If you just do the design right out the gate, you're not really like grounding any of that work in there. Usually the conversation is, well, why did you make that blue? Why did you make that stroke weight 5 pixels? It could be thinner. It becomes subjective. Design and art is subjective. It's like we're all going to a gallery, a museum, and I asked you, Isabel, hey, what do you think about this painting? And you're going to say, well, the painting makes me feel really happy and then sad. And then I might say, well, I feel sad and then happy and then angry. So it's really
Absolutely.
subjective, right? Of what that is. But once you actually read all the artist's intention about that painting, you start to really understand why that paint stroke was on that canvas. Why did that color add to that sort of canvas? So that's what I think is really important when it comes to sort of brand and strategy and positioning, and what comes first and what comes later, and really just growing up, right? We're all trying to evolve and grow
Absolutely. I
up.
love that perspective. And you like when I hear you sound so passionate, like you really love what you're doing. So I mean, I love to hear you this way. I mean, what a cool way to see your job. I mean, you can literally feel like the enthusiasm vibrating through you. Very cool.
Yeah, it's like, our job as like creative designers, creative people, we're just trying to communicate. We're just trying to communicate things in the
Yeah.
best way possible. And that's our job, is to really just simplify it. And I really like the challenge of like especially working in tech. My background and my co-founder's background is in technology. And so when we look and hear these founders get so excited about the AI tool that they are creating, I might not fully understand it, but I get excited from that founder. And that makes me want to do the really great work in order to communicate exactly that excitement through a stroke weight, through a positioning statement, through color or typography, right? I think we have so many levers to sort of pull and push when it comes to sort of brand and what a founder is really doing. It is very exciting. Every day is an
It sounds
exciting
like you
day.
have a lot of fun doing your work.
We do,
You have
yeah.
reached the ultimate goal.
Hey, there's plenty of fun to go around and plenty of fun to still keep
Absolutely. I
having.
love that. So you've worked at Whedon and Kennedy and AKQA, places known for bold creative ideas. And now you're helping B2B software companies own their category. So why do you think so many SaaS brands still end up looking similar? Do you think there's something driving that pattern?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think there are two answers to this question. One of them is one of them I think is like budget. I think and timing, I think I said earlier that a lot of founders need to move quick. They need to have a brand, they need to have typography or whatever, and they go out and they hire someone from Fiverr or whatever, right? And that's great for them at that stage of their company. They need to move fast. They need to build things. They need to get their name out there. That makes sense. But it does sort of attract designers or creators who don't think, they just do, right? And so when you're not thinking and listening from a founder or a company or your client deeply, and doing the deep thinking and the research and understanding what is it that's driving this person, then you can't really apply creative decisions on the things that you're making, especially that early, because especially when a founder doesn't quite really know what their product is. A product might look like this. 1 month
Yeah.
from now, a product might look something completely different. So it needs to be flexible. So it makes sense, right? Yeah, at that early stage, which does create homogenization and saturation when it comes to sort of like all brands like looking the same, right? One designer might be so great at creating a hero image and using sans serif typeface, and the copy stays here at the center, then three boxes with their services and the logo upon like that. It's pretty rudimentary, right? It's people know what a website looks like, and people can repeat that process over and over again, right? There's not much thinking involved in that. And then the other sort of like lever here is obviously AI, right? And AI is being trained on lots of previous designs and data, and people are building things from that. And, they are getting things that are similar and remixed, right? In a way, right? So there's not much thinking that has been applied to the reasoning of why they have created a website, how they're communicating their product or service. Me and my co-founder, we were just in San Francisco a few weeks ago at Y Combinator. They had invited us to represent Framer, the developer tool, the website tool Framer, to come in and give marketing advice to a lot of like early stage pre-seed founders. And what we found from that conversation, we met with about 20 people, and what we found through the red thread that we found through all of those folks was they have all vibe coded their website in about 4 hours or 5 hours. And do they look good? They look pretty good. They look pretty good. Do they look the same? Yeah, they kind of look the same if you really sort of squint at it, right? But the problem that they all sort of faced was they have founder jargon, right? Like, what is it that they are doing for their customer? It's confusing. And the image and the typography and what they're really saying is confusing. And so when a customer comes in to check the legitimacy of your business, it can look and sound very confusing and almost cause people to not trust you, right? And so, yeah, there are like levers to this, right? Like, so yeah, that's what I
Okay,
think.
that's interesting. And when you say you help companies own their category, what does category ownership actually look like in practice? Is it messaging, visual dominance, market share, cultural
Yeah.
presence?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. It's actually a little bit of all of that stuff. But if I was to hang my hat on one thing, is being an expert in one thing and doing it super well, and really understanding who your customers are and what they need from you, right? And I think like getting, instead of doing this, do more of this, because customers will see you as the expert and trust you and pay you more money and be more loyal to you because you're the expert in this category, right? You're not like, I'll give you another analogy, right? Your air conditioning system is broken. Are you going to hire the guy who, is a lot cheaper, and he does a little bit of painting, he does a little bit of locksmithing or whatever, but he also knows how to fix air conditionings from time to time? Or will you pay someone who, maybe is a little bit more expensive, but they've worked on thousands and thousands of air conditioning units? What is the thing that you're going to do? And he only works on air conditioning units. You're most likely going to work with the guy who's worked with 10,000 or 1,000 air conditioning units, because he's going to come in, identify the problem, and be like, okay, I know exactly what you do, and I know exactly how to fix it, and I'll do it in about 20 minutes. And so I think, when founders and startups becoming more sort of pointed to exactly what they do to their ICPs, I think it's going to be more foundational and really strategic, and I think that's the move right there.
I love your analogies. I think they're spot on.
You keep going with analogies.
And when you think about brands like Nike, their point of view isn't subtle, it's bold and unmistakable. What would it take for a SaaS company to operate with that same level of clarity?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It takes bollocks, it takes balls, really,
Amen.
somebody outside, I mean, honestly, really, for somebody outside of a vertical like Nike to Nike, whatever you want to call it, right? Like in England, we called it Nike too, but when you work for Nike, it's like Nike, everybody, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it takes someone with real balls and bollocks to really kind of understand their vertical, understand what the competitors are doing in that vertical, and do kind of the opposite, like really like look different, speak different, feel different. And that comes with the founder as well. Not every founder will do that. A good example is a client that we worked with last year, called Laurie Keat. They are based in Australia. They're a omni-channel customer support agent, right? Using AI, obviously, right? Like, so when you ask for if you lose your bank card and you chat with the bank and say, "Hey, I've lost my debit card," they're going to point you to the FAQ. You got to call someone. You got to, what they do is really use great AI and really kind of have human conversations with what they do and how to service and how to get your bank card. It pulls the right information, knowing who you are as you've logged in. And it's omni-channel, works over phone, text, whatever. I'm really selling Laurie Keat to everybody right here. But what I will say is that when we met with the founder, their biggest competitor is, a big player in the industry. I forget their name specifically. Intercom is that's who they are, and Intercom is a huge player. And so, how do you look different to Intercom? And Steve, the founder of Laurie Keat, he's a bullish guy. He is like, what they are doing at Intercom isn't right. It is completely different, and what they're saying to you on their website is essentially lying to you. And the way he sort of speaks, the way he thinks about the product, the way he is incredibly connected to his customers, wanting to solve the hard problems, no bullshit or anything. He's really in the work, deep in the work. As a founder and as a company, that is their vision, that is their sort of soul of the company. We now had the permission to go bold, to go different, to speak different, to design the website differently, to write more sort of aggressively, more so when their customers come to their website, they're like, "Whoa, these guys are legit." They're not putting sprinkles or sugar on the cupcake. They're really getting down to the brass tacks of how they are going to help me. And I think if you ever follow Steve on LinkedIn or on socials, he's really, really like what he talks about, what he says is very pointed, and it's awesome. It gets me excited. I'm not even a customer of their product, but it gets me excited about how they act and talk. Whereas Intercom is very sort of structured and robotic, and they don't really have much soul with what they do or care or yeah. So that's what I think.
The realest thing I've heard in a long time. I mean, because it takes courage to be different. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to be bold.
Yeah.
But I love that.
Absolutely. And that's what the folks at Nike, whatever you want to call it, right? Like that's what they are. They are bold people. And when you work for them or with them, Nike. I just heard this story recently, the Just Do It story. It actually comes from somewhat similar, like not similar, sorry, somewhat sad story, but like the tagline came from, I think, a prisoner who was about to get executed, actually. And they were like, "What is your final words?" And he was like, "Just do it," or something. He said something like this. And so they were like, "Well, why don't we use that tagline and really just, reframe it in a way to be so bullish?" It's crazy to think that the tagline, "Just do it," came from something so crazy, and when it's applied in a different context, in a different vertical, it gets people like, "Whoa, what do you mean just do it?" Like, what does that really mean? It kind of gives fuel and energy to people who read it, see it, say it. And I think Nike's advertising agency vendor is White & Kennedy, the company that I had worked for, based in Portland, Oregon. And those guys are crazy. The way they work, the way they think, they are bullish, they are crazy, they are tinkerers, they are making things in the office all the time. They are doing robots for no reason, and clients will come in and they'll say, "What is that?" They'll look at somebody's desk, they'll say, "What is that?" And they were like, "It's just a robot that I'm working on." And they will hire these guys to come up with wacky, crazy ideas, bold ideas, because they're tinkerers and thinkers, and they take different elements from different contexts and put it back into the work. So yeah, very, very, very cool.
I mean, definitely the coolest people doing the coolest things are, weird. Just embrace the weird.
Definitely. That's my motto this
I
week.
love
Embrace
it.
the weirdness.
I was
I'm taking
speaking
that one.
to a guest last week, and she fostered an environment where weirdness was normal, and like we talked about the power of being weird. So this just backs all of that up.
Yeah, I'll just sort of like, we are all unique, individual, different humans, and come from different perspectives and walks of lives and thinking and backgrounds and whatnot. We are, if I lived on the moon and you lived on Mars and we came to visit each other, we are both going to be weird. We're both going to talk different languages and see things differently. And we are all inherently weird. And so, like, embrace it, bring that into the work. And I think that's what the great folks at White & Kennedy do. They bring themselves into the work. And I think, like, that's something that I strive to do, my co-founder and the people that work with us, we strive to do. We strive to bring our own identities and our own experiences, our own weirdnesses into the work, because that's only going to make the work more interesting, more human, have more soul into everything that we touch, see, do, and feel.
I love that. This conversation just keeps getting better and better. I love it. In one of your posts, you talked about AI first founders rushing to build everything instantly and ending up with what you called AI slop. So what are the dead giveaways that a brand was built by speed instead of conviction, in your opinion?
It's hard to say. I think there are loads of like little things you can see and feel and do. It's kind of a feeling. It's the same sort of it's the same sort of feeling when you get an email in your inbox and it's like somebody asking for your social security number or your credit card number. It's like a scam, or it's like not trusted, right? It's that, and you just hit delete and you move on with your life. Yeah, there's a weird sort of feeling, right? And then I think, like, that's really what it is. Like, the text isn't really perfect. It's ragging very weirdly. The colors look kind of off. Like, the images just feel different. The text doesn't kind of work with the image, or the CTA just feels different. There's a, we live in a time where, everybody is using the internet every single day from all ages. And we are so, accustomed to what looks good and what looks trustworthy. And we are smart people. When we see something that doesn't quite feel right, we're not going to click on something. We're not going to go visit it. We're not going to engage with it. We're going to move away from it. If I send you a link to, apple.com, for example, and you go to Apple's website, you're gonna trust it immediately, right? Like, you can see the quality of, like, their product landing pages, right? But if I then send you a link to, I don't know, another phone company or a product company that isn't so quite out there, and it's not at the bar of, like, Apple, or not even that, even like maybe 5 notches down, it's not going to look trustworthy. It's not going to look real or legitimate. And with AI, like, the lens of making things looking more legitimate and real are really blurring. And there was a time, when people were, did you ever use Kickstarter by any chance? Did you ever do any of that? Kickstarter, everybody was, like, really into Kickstarter. Like, oh my God, wow, these guys are building this product. I'm going to fund this product and then get this product. Loads of times those products get funded, they put it into production, they can't build it, it changes, it looks different, and now you're left with a broken product with false promises. Now the company doesn't exist anymore, right? The trust is lost. The customer feels horrible. And I think with AI and AI slop, I think there is a lot of people creating, making things that probably are not doing too much and possibly pulling the wool over people's and customers' eyes to almost deteriorate people's trust. And I think that will happen in many different verticals across the industry, is that people will create AI slop to sell people a product, and people will come to a point where they're going to trust this company to deliver on their promises. And if they don't, they're going to feel pretty bad and try to and might not trust other companies in the future, right? It will pull legitimate companies from the unlegitimate companies pretty far apart. And those legitimate companies will need to work much harder to win customers' trust. And I think like that's kind of the pendulum swing that we will probably find ourselves in, is a lot of things being created, but a lot of people not trusting. And it will come back to the point where at the end of the day, real people making real things, I think will be very, very important.
And continuing the thread of AI, you've said that AI is the sous chef, not the chef, which I think is a chef's kiss saying. But yeah, but practically speaking, where does AI actually help you in your workflow at Workisplay Studio, and where do you refuse to let it touch the process?
Yeah, I mean, AI is the research partner that you never had. And, when when you used to spend days and hours trying to figure out like what is real, the research and things to get you to your ideas clearer to a result is much faster. It happens instantaneously. I don't need to tell you what AI is. Everybody who's probably listening knows how AI works, right? And how it's impacting in their life. But for us, I think it's experimentation. I think it's like we are using tools to help bring information to us much quicker, and for us to make our own decisions based on that research, whether it's the truth or not, or a hunch or not, we get to make that decision. And that's an exciting thing that we do. And I'm trying to maybe kind of give you a something that we probably do, but having a hard time putting my finger on that. But one example is, me and my co-founder, we both were on Notion, and we are building deep documentation of how we work, our methodologies, our practice, our brand systems, our color, typography, and connecting Claude and Claude Code to a Figma MCP, a Notion MCP, and having everybody talk to each other. And so when we need the more rudimentary things, it's easy to sort of surface those things. I'm not looking and seeking through hundreds of documents trying to find the answer. I'm getting the answer pretty quickly to me. But then on the other side, like using AI to challenge myself, right? Right now we're working on, we're writing like blog posts for our new website that we just launched recently. And we want to have some more creative ideas on how we do blog imagery. Claude already knows kind of our voice and tone pretty well. Claude already knows the colors that we give it, the typography in the system. It knows the dimensions that we need to export. It can help bring ideas based on the blog article pretty quickly, right? Surface them pretty quickly, right? And that is a really interesting starting point for me. I usually take that, I will move into Figma, I will start to put some of those ideas together. Usually 9 times out of 10, I'd say maybe 8 times out of 10, it's pretty robotic, or it's not very sharpened. It has a lack of taste. lack of creativity. I think it can put words to something pretty elegantly and pretty well, but when it comes to sort of visual taste, I don't think it can really like do it very, very well. And so my job is to really sort of take those words, throw some things at it, maybe remix it a little bit more, and then move into Figma and see how I can evolve that piece of creative and add my own sort of flavor and flair to make sure it makes sense and unify it to the brand that we're sort of creating. So that's one way that like I've been using AI. Of course, like you know, Claude Code we used a lot to sort of create tooling. I think is really important to sort of prototype and test things. And I'll give you one example. Last year we had a client that we were building a lot of heavy animations, right? So these animations were not being built in Jitter or a web-friendly tool. We were working with an animator that was working in After Effects, building these animations in After Effects. The workflow that we needed it matched the pacing and the quality bar that we wanted to sort of deliver on. But how do we get videos, lots of heavy animations and product animations and videos to work on the web? Great. Chrome works really, really well with every type of format, but Safari doesn't really like alpha, doesn't really like those types of formats. We can't use MP4s because they don't contain alpha. We need to use WebMs with alpha channels on them. The file size is huge. What kind of CDN do we use to sort of host these files, crunch them to make them small? We need to do a lot of testing to figure out how are we going to get the quality pretty high with the codecs looking well, working across Safari and Chrome for both of our clients' audiences. And so we use Claude Code to build a quick tool where we as in like myself, our animator, our designers, to essentially drag and drop video files that they've exported into this tool to then output like, how does it look on Chrome? How does it look on Safari? The frame rate, the file size, and really kind of dive deep into those details so we can really refine what we need to do once we're ready and in production to sort of make sure that the production timeline is moving really, really smoothly. So Claude Code and AI building these tool sets have really helped bring that clarity much quicker than just sort of like testing on and off and making the client feel like, well, hold on a second, the performance sucks here. What are we going to do about it? And then we're back to the drawing table, testing. So yeah, it's allowed us to move faster with tooling. I think that's really, really
Very
important.
cool and interesting. I'm gonna quote you again because I think you've said some really cool things. But you've said design systems aren't meant to box brands in. They're meant to be bent and pushed. So how do you build a system that protects consistency but still allows creative evolution?
Yeah, good question. I'm taking a thread here from my time at Facebook and the time at Apple. They had they had specific teams that led brand systems and brand systems designed across product and across marketing. And they were teams that were very, very meticulous about the details and but very, very creative when it came to working with folks who wanted to sort of bend the system or bend some of the rules to stay within those guidelines. And I think having those folks as really good creative partners to sort of listen to us, who we wanted to sort of bend the rules a little bit and challenge us to sort of, okay, cool, maybe we can change the typography here and change it with this sort of scale and add this sort of color, but then we can keep the framework, pretty close to our brand systems, I think was a real delightful challenge and welcoming challenge. I still think that like that's always a part of brand and how brand needs to evolve through a design system is really just, yes, you have the base guideline of how a brand should work. Let's not, a good sort of creative director, a good design director, whether that be an in-house team or on the vendor side, just really challenging. Hey, we shouldn't do it like this. Here are some things we can do to bring it closer to your voice that we've developed for you. We had an interesting example, and building those relationships as well, through that engagement, whether it be on the internal or external side. But an interesting sort of example I'll give you is with a client from another client from last year. We had launched their website, we had launched everything. The designer on their team, they only had one designer on the team, reached out to me on Slack and said, "Hey, look, like we're doing things like this. What do you think?" And I said, "Hey, look, this is really good, but it's steering a little bit away from the brand. But look, let me show you how I can reel it in and fix some of the typography and the colors and how we can make this a templatized system." And I worked with him in Figma in like 15, 20 minutes, just very like live. And just, we built out a pretty comprehensive like system that they can just deploy on LinkedIn pretty quickly. And having that sort of really like quick like relationship, builds that trust and builds that confidence with clients, who know that, hey, look, we haven't given you a rigid system. It's okay to push it, but like, here are some of the design details that you need to sort of tighten to really kind of bring it into that container. So yeah, it takes a real sort of design director, creative director who values a system, but also knows how to stay within those guidelines. But at every stage of every company, there's going to be a moment where like, how do you evolve that? How do we need to grow up and graduate from school to university or beyond, and so that will, the company positioning and strategy is changing. And so, do they re-engage with a different vendor to help re-elevate and re-change their brand structure? Maybe the deliverables aren't 10 deliverables, maybe they're 20, maybe they're 40, 50 deliverables when it comes to their brand and design system. Across the board, and their use cases and applications, depending on the growth stage of a company. So yeah, there's lots of like levers here, and I don't think there's any like straight line to this, I think, brand should of course be a foundational element, but I think like you should be able to keep pushing it beyond. I think delivering a brand or delivering a company like a 100-page document with colors and typography can be quite overwhelming and might not match every use case for everything. And I think it really takes a strong leader within those brand teams to sort of say, okay, hold on, we're going to make a couple elements from here. We're going to try it like this. We're going to test it. We're going to see how it works on our website. We're going to see how it works on our socials. We're going to see how it works with accessibility. Does it pass all those measures? And then we're going to deploy this thing and see how we react and change things. We're going to tighten the screws here and there.
And you talk a lot about taste, and I'm curious if you think taste can actually be trained, or is there a point where someone either has the eye or doesn't?
I think taste could be trained, but the taste is it's going back to that what we said earlier about being weird, right? Like, and being from all walks and different walks of life and countries, right? Like, I'm sure if we decided to take each other to a museum and look at our favorite piece of art, you will show me something that's completely different, and I will show you something that's completely different. But I will say that you probably have a very specific, unique taste, and so will I. And I think taste can't be trained. Taste is culture. It's human intuition. It's a feeling, and I think the people who have really good taste are the people who are, I think, in touch with things that are just outside of their circle, outside of the bubble. Folks who are not only going to museums, they're opening books, they're looking at different contexts, right? Another example is the Just Do It thing, right? Like, he didn't look at like what the other athletic companies are doing, right? He looked at what somebody said. He might have watched a YouTube video of somebody saying that at the prison, right? Or whatever, right? Like, and so it's, taste is unique to each individual, and what we bring to the table through our lens, our culture, our the way we speak, the way we talk, the way we create, the way we think, the way we objectively think about different things. I think taste is really an amplification of all of those things, and great people put together in a room to talk about how these things could kind of come together to make something really amazing. I think that's taste. Can it be trained? I don't think so. That's a hard thing. You might see, we might go to, like I said, we might go to this museum and we might see a piece of art. Come back a month later, we'll probably show each other completely different pieces of art. And I think that's really fun. I think that's really, really unique, Maybe I won't show you a painting. Maybe I'll show you jewelry, right? That looks really different and it's handmade and it's handcrafted and it speaks to me in a certain way. And that context might bring us into a different conversation. That's taste. That's something that an AI can't do. It's being trained on multiple different things,
That's
So yeah,
such
that's my
a
perspective.
powerful and cool and beautiful way of point of view. I mean, I love it. I had never thought of it that way. So thank you for expanding
Yeah.
my perspective in this way.
Yeah. And I think like I'll add one other thing to this that I think is really like powerful, I think is people. Like again, we're all from different walks of life, but talking to people, having conversations with your neighbor, your the person at the barista at the coffee shop, your peers and coworkers, and understanding how they're thinking, that is in itself influential to taste, I think. When I worked at Apple and Meta, in office, not remote, like I would spend the first 30, people thought I was crazy and maybe I still am here, but I would spend 30 to 40 minutes at the beginning of my day, just walking to different people's, desks and asking them how they're doing, and they would talk about work. I was like, oh, no, don't talk to me about work. Talk to me about like, how are you doing? What's inspiring you lately? What are you excited about
So
recently?
cool.
And it might be, children. It might be something they did over the weekend. But I think it brings not only beautiful rapport and trust and relationship through a working environment, but it brings a sense of like, oh, this person is interested in I don't know, swimming, right? Or this person is interested in what's happening in Brazil and Carnival in Brazil, right? And I think like going to those people in the time of like creative thinking and needs, and or they might say something that might trigger an idea for me to go deeper down the rabbit hole and pull that reference. Those are the beautiful things. Taste is everywhere with people.
Oh my God, I love that. I absolutely love that. You mentor thousands of designers and help them, land their dream jobs. What's the biggest misconception young designers have about what it takes to work at places like Apple or Whedon and Kennedy?
I think that's a good question. I think the misconception is, I mean, it's a lot of things. I think students or younger creatives, they see the name, right? Like they see, oh, Apple, right? I want to go work for Apple. And when you ask them why they want to go work for Apple, they say, oh, well, I want to work in tech and I want to make six figures in salary or whatever, right? Um, that's not enough to work somewhere, right? You're working for money. Whereas in this field, you're working for the love of something that is beyond that. And in my entire career, like I've always sort of hung my hat on getting excited about something. I've always wanted to work at Apple, like since I was 12 years old. And so when I walked into the interview, they hired me essentially on the spot. 20 minutes later, after I was driving back to San Francisco, they called me and they hired me on the spot because I came in. It wasn't really about money for me. It was about like changing the world. It was about working with incredible designers and learning from them and developing the website and how we told stories, and I actually, during my interview, I just told stories. Like I told stories about how Apple changed my life. And that's enough. That's a signal right there to know that whether this person is very talented or medium talented, this person has care. This person has empathy. This person, is, there's no ego here. There's no bias here. There is just pure sort of like love and energy that this person would put into the work, into making the quality of the work really, really well. That everything else can be sort of trained, right? Like on the spot or on the job, right? And, I learned a lot from working there. But I think a lot of designers, they're either chasing the money, the economics of things in the world are much harder these days. And I think politics is much harder these days. And Gen Xers or, whatever the next level is, they're going to have a much harder time getting to what they want. And so that dream, that sort of ambition is not deteriorating, but it's looking a lot different these days. What does that really look like? So that I think is the biggest misconception is wanting to work for a place that you have no idea
Yeah.
what they do. I think is a big misconception, right? Like if you want to go work for a place, you got to know what
Yeah.
they fucking do. You got to know how they speak. You got to I want to go work for Nike. Great. Well, you wear Adidas shoes all day, right? That doesn't make any sense. You want to go work for Nike? Speak, live, breathe, think the culture. When you get to that interview, when you get to that, when you speak to someone at Nike and you have that opportunity to talk to someone there, tell them your ideas. Tell them oh, hey, that Nike Jordan 1 shoe, I think I have a campaign idea for that. And I took the colors off the shoe and I made it into a landing page. And now there's all these social activations and somebody's jumping off a roof with a parachute with those colors and they're wearing the Jordan shoe. I don't know. I'm just spitballing bullshit here. But that's more of an exciting pitch versus I'm a designer. I've done all these other things. Hire me.
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah, that was great advice. The people that get to be mentored by you are very lucky, which leads me to...
Yeah, I'm also no bullshit, right? I don't try to sprinkle anything on anything. I'm pretty blunt about how people think. And I think I think my mentors either love me or hate me because of that, but that's okay, right? I'm not going to, I'm from Europe. I don't try to put any, sprinkles on anything. It's hard. The world is hard, and I might be wrong, I might be right, but this is just my perspective on how I think people want to hire other people.
Absolutely. And this sort of leads me to my last question. I always love asking this because I think it's very special when there are people who take the time to guide us and challenge us and shape us in ways we don't fully understand until later. So when you look back on your career, who are 3 people who deeply inspired you or marked you in a meaningful way?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. And, I could name 3, I could name 300, honestly. There are so many people that have, seen the twinkle in my eye and reached out and held out their hand and say, hey, look, I'm going to carry you up the ladder with me. And, there's honestly, there is so many people to name. But one of them, his name is Steve. He was a creative director at Wieden & Kennedy, and he came to my university and he, I had this book, and he flicked through the book and he pointed at something and he said, hey, I did that work. And I said, oh, what did you do? And we started talking about how he hand wrote the typography for this Levi's campaign and how he would he did it using kind of white ink, and then he would scan it and then print it and then crumple the paper and then tear the paper and fuck with the paper and then put it back in, scan it, print it again, and then do it 3 or 4 times and then bring it into Illustrator and then build an entire typeface out of that. And we totally geeked out for 20 minutes, and he asked me, hey, do you want to come work for us? And he, do you want to keep talking? And he was the one that really took me to from Atlanta, Georgia, from university to Wieden & Kennedy. And he kind of put me under his wing. And he, again, he was no bullshit kind of guy. And he was very sort of this is what I think, and this is how we need to work on this. And he was a really inspiring guy. And, I follow him on LinkedIn and we still keep in touch. And, he's still doing that every single day. And, it's a beautiful person. And, a few other people, another creative director I worked with at AKQA, just really who cared about the craft, cared about the design, cared about people. I think that's like, a big sort of thing is this guy Whitney. He really cared about people and their ambitions and what they wanted to do. It wasn't just a job; it was a career. It was what are you bringing to the table that is your unique self. He was an amazing person and an inspiration to me every single day. Old college professors who kept asking me why, like go deeper, keep asking, why did you make that one pixel? Why did you make that green or whatever, right? Like those guys continue to challenge me in my brain every single day about, why are we objectively looking at, pieces of work, and why are we not asking the questions that we really need to ask? What is the reasoning about why we're doing things is very, very important. And of course, many people along the way at Apple, and even, personally, like, who have really just sort of, again, reached their hand out and pulled me up the ladder. And I think, going back to your last question about mentorship and students and who not, like, and even with people that I meet, in walking by in like life, sometimes Uber drivers, I'll just talk to them, and I'm like, oh, have you tried this or have you tried that? And, I think we have a responsibility to, look at the younger community, and younger community, that's not the right word, but the younger designers and people who are just getting started with their career, and seeing the mistakes that you made and seeing kind of what they're doing, being inspired by them, and being interested and curious about what they're building, what they're doing, but help steering them in a way where, they can solve these problems and approach these problems with a much bigger scale and that thinking around what they're doing. And I think, like, again, holding my hand out and like bringing them along with me up the ladder, right? It's my responsibility, and I think it's like everybody's responsibility to do that as you
Yeah,
progress in your career.
absolutely. I like I said, I think that the younger generations of designers, or who get to work with you, are very lucky.
Yeah, that's very kind. And it's honestly very lucky to work with them. Again, I get inspired by everybody, and, not every day is a same day. Every day is different. And I get to be excited about meeting people and hearing people of their backgrounds and walks of life. And that's really important to me, to keep staying inspired and bring good taste.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for being here and walking us through your thinking so openly. I really appreciate the clarity you brought to this conversation. It's been so cool and meaningful, and it honestly has left me in a very reflective state, which I always love, to, leave a conversation just wanting to reflect on what we have discussed, and the insights you have brought, and your perspective, I think, is so cool and very profound. So thank you so much for being here and taking the time.
Very kind. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend and, of course, subscribe.